After 2 years living in room 302 in South Ashfield Heights, Henry Townsend begins to suffer from headaches as well as recurring nightmares. It's a few days later when Henry finds himself trapped in his apartment with his front door chained from the inside. When a mysterious hole appears in the bathroom, he crawls through, in believing it's his only chance of escape, but instead triggers a series of events that will eventually lead him to uncovering the truth behind room 302. Through this journey, Henry will encounter many monsters that are symbolic manifestations created from the mind of a serial killer. In this video, I'll be taking a look back at the creatures of Silent Hill 4 The Room and analysing each of them in turn. And if you do enjoy this video and want to see more, leave a like and subscribe, that way you can stay up to date on all future videos I put up. Before going into the topic of the video, it's best to provide some context to the monsters in the game, to have a better understanding of what's happening to Henry. 34 years ago, prior to the events of the game, a baby was born within apartment 302 of South Ashfield Heights. This baby would grow to become a serial killer and a religious fanatic. His name is Walter Sullivan. When his parents abandoned him as a newborn baby, the building superintendent discovered him a short time later and gave him to the nearby hospital. Eventually, Walter would be taken to an orphanage in the town of Silent Hill. Unknown to many, the Wish House orphanage was run by a local cult known as the Order, who raised and taught Walter in their fanatical beliefs. It was here that he would meet Dahlia Gillespie, one of the cult leaders, who told him that his mother was asleep in the town of Ashfield. And through this misinterpretation, Walter would go on to believe that room 302 was his actual mother. As a child, Walter would sneak away from the orphanage, often to return to the room he was born in to try to find his mother. As the years went by, the events that triggered the nightmares in Silent Hill caused the town, including the orphanage, to be abandoned to the fog, and the destruction of the Order left Walter with no home to return to. In his late teens, he moved to the town of Pleasant River, living a new life as a university student, but grew to resent humanity. As a young adult, Walter wanted to finally reunite with his mother and started to become more influenced by the teachings of the Order. One particular area from the cult's Bible, called the 21 Sacraments for the Descent of the Holy Mother, became Walter's obsession. Remembering what Dahlia once told him, he believed he could awaken his mother by doing the ritual of the 21 Sacraments, which required the deaths of 21 people. The Order believed that this ritual would bring about their version of paradise, but to Walter, all he wanted was to be reunited with his mother. When he returned to Ashfield, Walter began the 21 Sacraments by murdering 10 people, removing their hearts and carving numbers into their bodies. He was eventually captured after completing the first part of the ritual. He was tried and sentenced to prison, where Walter took his own life in his cell. However, his death was the 11th in the ritual and was necessary to allow his ghost to complete the last 10 murders. He goes on to kill 5 more, including the previous occupant of room 302, before the story of the game begins. Henry Townsend, who had been living in room 302 for the past 2 years, finds himself in Walter's other worlds, encountering creatures that are created by Walter's negative emotions and memories. With his meddling with dark magics to perform the 21 Sacraments, another byproduct of these rituals takes the form of these ghosts, who were the victims that Walter killed, that have now become violent shadows of their former selves. So with that all in mind, let's take a closer look at the monsters. These canine creatures are the first enemy types encountered. Their skins appear to be decaying, exposing in some parts the flesh beneath. They have long tongues that they drag along the floor, and will use it to drain the blood from a carcass. Sniffer dogs come in two types. The males have empty eye sockets, green tinted skin, and a red tongue. While the female types have a tumour-like growth covering their eyes, missing ears, red tinted skin, and a purple tongue. The male sniffer dogs will do a lunging bite attack. While the female versions will use their jaws to immobilize their prey as they chomp on their flesh. There's no evidence within the story to reveal Walter's fear of dogs, though it's likely that if they have been conjured by him, then this particular animal must have had some negative effect in his life, as Walter was homeless at one point, where he ended up sleeping rough inside South Ashfield Station. He may have encountered feral dogs. They could even be a recollection of the time that Walter visited Garland's pet shop as a child, or even when he killed the shop owner and slaughtered every animal, including dogs, with a submachine gun. In addition, their tongues bear a close resemblance to an umbilical cord, which could be a reflection of Walter's longing to return to his mother. The greedy worms are not a killable monster and pose no threat to Henry, but are worth a brief mention here as they are first seen early on in the game. These giant creatures have a slimy and bloody exterior, appear in various lengths, and are seen in 3 out of the 6 otherworld locations. The longer ones move through areas infinitely and are found burrowing into the walls, while the shorter worms are more mobile, revealing a grinning face with sharp teeth at both ends of their bodies. They can be struck, however, with a weapon, which they'll bleed as a result of it, and twist their large bodies in response to the attack. As Walter's umbilical cord is an item of importance in the story, which was found by the apartment superintendent and kept in a box, these creatures may be a reference to it. As described in an old picture book, once read to Walter at the orphanage, it mentions the connection of a mother with her son through a magical cord, that the cord was eventually cut and the mother went to sleep. The greedy worm may be seen then as a twisted manifestation of both Walter's desire to reconnect with his mother through this magic cord, and the Walter who might have harboured resentment towards his mother's abandonment. Even the creature's name is a negative connotation of the umbilical cord that is meant to provide nutrients to the fetus. There are 2 variants of these monsters who all appear as faceless humanoids. The wall men are the regular enemy types that are blended with the textures of the walls and are attached to the surface from the waist down, while the other versions, known as the One Truth, are larger and more powerful. This variant encounter acts more like a boss battle and appears to be attached to hooks inside of a metal frame. Its rotting skin has been stretched out and fixed onto the frame by more hooks. While both variants have the same types of attacks, they do move in their environments differently. The wall men are unable to move from the spot they appear in, and will either remain hidden within the walls or stick their heads out in search of Henry as they wait for their chance to strike at him when he's close. The One Truth, along with its decoys, are pulled up or dropped to the ground by hooks that are attached to metal frames, and enables them to escape Henry's assaults. The actual One Truth is hidden amongst its decoys, and they cannot be destroyed. When the One Truth is struck, all the decoys will react. Both variants will attack by either doing a cross swipe an upward or downward swipe, and a downwards headbutt. As these creatures are Walter's manifestations, they are mixed in with his memories of particular locations, and the Wallmen may be linked to the water prison. It's a repurposed lighthouse near the orphanage that the Order would use to send children who misbehaved to learn the cult scriptures under fear of torture. The Wallmen may represent Walter's fear of the prison cell that he wanted to escape from, and of his abuse by the hands of the prison watchman, Andrew DeSalvo. How they remain in the walls, watching and waiting to harm Henry, may be a reflection on the adults of the Order, who would constantly monitor the children in their cold and damp cells through a spy hole. The One Truth appears just before Henry enters room 302 of the past, and acts like a final challenge before Henry learns the truth about Walter, thus becoming the receiver of wisdom, the final victim in the 21 Sacraments. The Hummers are small, black flying creatures that appear to have the body of a hummingbird with the wings of a bat, which flap rapidly to the point that they become blurred. They're no real threat beyond being a nuisance and will use hit-and-run tactics. They have a long, needle-like beak that they'll use to peck their target with. As Hummers are flying creatures, they may be seen as a symbol of freedom, something that a young boy would be yearning for, being locked up in a cold and dark prison cell. The symbolism of bats in some cultures can be associated with darkness, malevolence, and death, while the hummingbird is a symbol of love and joy. This mixture of creatures is comparable to the duality of the two Walters, the serial killer and the innocent child. These fungus-like monsters appear in two forms and are fixed into position after rising from the ground. Toadstools have a fleshy and bloody stem that forms at the top into the shape of a human head. The other variation are the Whitestools, and they function the same way, differing only in appearance. They have a white stem with green veins that end with what can best be described as a snake-like head. Both variants can also grow out of corpses. They grow in large groups to block their prey, and only do minor damage when Henry walks into them. They will sway to ensure a hit on their target, and will themselves be destroyed in the process. As the name suggests, Toadstool is a fungus. They tend to appear in damp environments, whether it's water or blood. These creatures are most likely reminders of the cold and wet prison cell that Walter was in, an environment that would be susceptible to fungi growth. These leeches are another nuisance enemy type that appear in two variations, but function in the same way. The creatures can move either along the ground, the wall, or the ceiling, and can speed forward, leaving a trail of slime on the surface. The dark Tremers have a segmented and flat body with pointed ends, while the white Tremers are more plump with red tinge to the skin and has a body shaped like a teardrop. Tremers don't pose any real threat on their own, but can chip away at Henry's health if he comes into contact with them. Some will also wag their tail ends as a warning to Henry. The only danger from them is if they come into contact with Henry, whether by dropping from the ceiling onto him or slither near to his feet, they will explode into a pulpy mess. Leeches could have been encountered at any time in Walter's life, either in the forests around the orphanage, the water prison next to Toluca Lake, or during the times when Walter was homeless. Though it's never specified, one message found in the water prison alludes to children being forced to drink something with black things in it, which was possibly leeches. These creatures are seen in some cultures as a symbol of rebirth and renewal. Their presence within the other worlds could even be seen as a kind of cleansing for Walter's psyche, as he readies himself for the final ritual killing so that he can return to his mother's womb. The first variant is encountered within the water prison and appear in the form of conjoined twins, with their heads close together. They have pale skin and wear a black, ragged smock with a hood. As they have no legs, these creatures will instead move around on their long arms, using their giant hands like feet. Another variant will appear later, wearing no clothing and revealing a more deformed body with rotting skin. This creature has a pair of mangled faces with another head and body that hangs from the bottom like a tail. Both versions will balance on one hand, while pointing at Henry with the other, and whispers the word receiver, alluding to him being the receiver of wisdom. Their arms have a long reach and will attack by either doing a downward strike, a cross swipe from the front, or at the back if the target's behind them. They will even launch their bodies forward to do a jumping headbutt. These monsters are unique compared to the others, as they are manifestations of Walter Sullivan's 7th and 8th victims, who are the only two that don't return as vengeful ghosts, and there's no explanation as to why this is. Billy and Miriam Locane were child siblings who were killed by Walter with an axe before having their hearts removed. The twin victims' physical appearance reflects this familial attachment in such a way that shows what Walter wants to have with his own fictionalized mother. An even more disturbing interpretation may be seen with the bottom creatures, who could have been created out of Walter's hatred for his actual parents. The two mangled faces could be seen as representations of his parents who he's never seen, while the body hanging upside down at its tail end might suggest Walter's childbirth. Gumheads are ape-like beings that are encountered in two forms. The old types have decaying grey skins that exposes their spinal column. They have a long tail, and the skin on their faces have melted over their eyes and mouth, while the lumpy mass of flesh on their chest looks like another head is emerging. The new types' bodies appear more bloody, they have a tail, and their faces look more human, with prominent facial features. Their jaw is missing, along with a portion of their chest, enabling what appears to be a bloody head to emerge. Both types are capable of moving around on 2 feet or on all fours. While standing, they move slow and meticulous, and will attack by either doing an angled downward strike or a cross swipe. When they are on all fours, they can move around fast and even leap great distances. In this position, the gumheads can launch forward and punch their targets. The new types can even use melee weapons, such as the golf clubs and steel pipe, that can be stolen from Henry or found on the floor. With it, they can either do a jump attack, a forward poke, or a downward swing. The Gumheads behave similar to the Rompers from the first game, who were conjured by Alessa Gillespie, suggesting that the Order, which she and Walter had both been a part of, shared the same fears that the cult instilled in every child under their care. Walter's hatred and fear of adults, like Andrew DeSalvo in the water prison and Richard Braintree from the apartments, seem to have manifested into these abusive monsters. Both variants' appearances have strange head deformities coming out of their chest, like they're giving birth in their own twisted way. This topic of birth is seen throughout the game, and is a symbolism of world transitions, like the ghosts passing through walls, Henry travelling between worlds, and Walter himself trying to return to his mother. The patient is a tall female humanoid that appears to be stitched together and wearing a tattered hospital gown. Half of their body has a pale white colour to the skin, while the other half looks to be in a more advanced state of decay. Their face is split in half, with one part stitched higher than the other, and they have long white hair. There's also a strange growth that protrudes from the front of the uterus. They wield a steel pipe with one hand, and will attack by doing an angled downward strike multiple times. They will sometimes hold the pipe in both hands to do a downward strike. If Henry is behind them, the patient will do a 180 turn to hit him with the end of the pipe. The patients seem to be a manifestation of the corpse that Walter was seen experimenting on within the hospital world. His obsession with the female womb compelled him to open up the body and stick his hand into the uterus to get a better understanding of it, as Walter's desire to awaken his mother is his main objective. Being able to finally enter room 302 that he sees as his mother is tantamount to returning to her womb. As a side note, also found within the hospital world are the possessed wheelchairs that will constantly be in motion and will knock Henry to the ground if he gets too close to them. Their appearance only further supports Walter's memories of hospitals. These appear throughout the story who will try to harm Henry. They are indestructible enemies that can pass through walls and float in the air. Ghosts are the tortured souls of Walter's victims who were murdered for his ritual of the 21 sacraments. They appear as undead shadows of their former selves, with decaying skin and wearing the clothing that they were killed in. Most of these enemy types will behave the same way. Being near to them is harmful to Henry as he will suffer from intense headaches. They will attack by either reaching into Henry's chest to grab his heart, or will attempt to chomp on his chest. Ghost victim number 4 is a unique enemy type that will use his trowel. Instead of grabbing Henry's heart, he'll either attack by doing a horizontal slice or a vertical slice. Though Walter had killed many people, only 6 of these so-called old-type ghosts will appear throughout the game. 3 of these were murdered whilst Walter was still alive in what is known as the 10 Hearts Murders, by which the victims' hearts were removed from their chests. The other 3 were killed after Walter took his own life, making himself the 11th victim, and returned as an immortal being to continue his ritual murder spree. The first of the new type ghosts, who were killed after Henry moved into room 302, is Cynthia Velasquez. Victim 16 appears when Henry returns to the subway world. In her ghost form, she wears the same clothing she died in and has rotting skin. Her distinguishing feature is her long black flowing hair that hides away most of her face. Victim 16 will use her long flowing hair to immobilize Henry, as it will reach out toward him like a pair of grabbing hands to restrict his movements. When she is struck to the floor, Victim 16 may begin to crawl toward her target. Or even slither across the ground. Her two ways of attacking are the same as the old type ghosts. She will either impale Henry to grab his heart, or will chew on his chest. Cynthia Velasquez is a seductive Hispanic woman who becomes trapped within Walter's subway otherworld. Her connection to Walter goes back to the time when he was sleeping rough inside the subway station in his mid-teens. Walter started to notice a 13-year-old Cynthia amongst her friends, commuting to school. His growing attraction to Cynthia gave him the courage to finally speak to her, only to be belittled and shunned by Cynthia in front of her laughing friends. Years later, Cynthia would be hunted throughout South Ashfield Station, a location that Walter had conjured from his bad memories by using dark magic. She eventually dies from multiple stab wounds, passing away while in the arms of Henry. The second of the new type ghosts is Jasper Gein. Victim 17 is encountered in the forest world after Henry rescues Eileen. The ghost appears on fire from the waist up, with his skin and clothing completely burnt. Due to Victim 17's fiery body, anyone close to him will take damage from the heat. He uses as a weapon the same candlestick that he held onto during his final moments in life, and will attack by either doing a horizontal slice or a vertical slice. And if Henry is far enough away from him, Victim 17 will use the candlestick on himself, as he retraces the numbers that he carved on his chest before he died. Jasper Gein, along with his friends Bobby Randolph and Shane Martin, were high school students who were obsessed with anything to do with the occult, as well as the history of the Order in Silent Hill. Around 10 years ago, Jasper and his friends learned of Walter Sullivan's connections to the Old Order and went to his university campus in Pleasant River to seek him out. But it was at this point Walter had already begun the 21 Sacraments and killed Randolph and Martin by strangulation, making them victims number 2 and 3, and then removed their hearts. Jasper barely escaped with his life from the campus, and 10 years later, Walter had caught up to him at the now abandoned Wish House, where he set Jasper on fire. Henry, being a witness to this event, sees Jasper appreciative of the act, before finally perishing from the flames. The third new type ghost is Andrew DeSalvo. Victim 18 is seen on the second journey through the water prison, in the winding passage leading to the basement. The ghost appears bloated with pale skin, and floats around topless, revealing the numbers carved on his belly. He will also sometimes be heard singing to himself. Victim 18 has some unique attacks that take advantage of his floating ability. He can strike by either launching his body toward his target, or will do a barrel roll. Andrew DeSalvo was never a member of the Order, but was employed by them to be one of the watchmen at the orphanage and water prison. He's a drunk who was tasked with observing the children, a position that Andrew would go on to abuse, leaving an everlasting impression on Walter Sullivan. It is even suggested that Andrew may have even killed one of Walter's childhood friends while in the prison. Years later, Andrew would be trapped inside one of the cells within the water prison world, now having to wait for the time of his own execution. And even though Henry frees him from his cell, Walter eventually finds Andrew and drowns him in the execution chamber. The fourth new type ghost is Richard Braintree, who is encountered on the second journey through the building world. This ghost also has a palish, decaying skin, with charred and bloodied clothing. Unlike the others, this ghost will walk instead of float in the air. Victim 19 moves and attacks erratically. He'll sometimes freeze on the spot, only to start moving backwards like he's rewinding, and will often have violent convulsions while he's moving forward. He's able to phase across short distances to appear where you least expect him. Given the chance, Victim 19 may reach into Henry's chest to grab his heart. Wielding a crowbar, his attacks are the same as the patient's. He'll either do an angled downward strike multiple times, a single downward strike, or a 180 turn to hit his target with the end of his crowbar. Richard Braintree was known to Henry for years as he lived within South Ashfield Heights in room 207. As an angry and violent man who carried a revolver around with him, it left a dark impression in the mind of Walter Sullivan. When he made his frequent visits to the apartments in search of his mother, Richard would often scare the child away from the building by threatening Walter. Years later, Richard would be hunted throughout what is known as the building world, which is an amalgamation of several shops and other locations that Walter had visited during his lifetime. When Henry enters room 207, Richard is seen strapped to an electric chair and unable to help him. Richard eventually dies as the 19th victim. Walter Sullivan makes his first appearance in South Ashfield Heights as a non-aggressive character. He has long hair, wearing a black overcoat, beige trousers, and black trainers. This is actually the ghost of Walter, who had manifested into a corporeal form after making himself the 11th victim. Now an indestructible entity, he continued to murder for his 21 sacraments. A side effect of this is that deep within Walter's subconscious mind, he also created a child version of himself, which represents the innocence of Walter, who's only wandering through the other worlds to find his mother. After Henry finds Eileen, Walter becomes hostile and will appear in various locations with different weapons. In many of the encounters, Walter wields a pistol in one hand and a metal pipe in the other. He'll fire off a series of single shots with the pistol from any range. And with the pipe, he'll either perform a quick outward swipe or a charged cross strike. In one location, Walter will replace the pipe for a chainsaw and attack by either thrusting it forwards or waves the chainsaw crazily in front of him. In another location, Walter will use two pistols to rapidly fire off several rounds. When exploring the apartments, we learn that Walter's father was verbally abusive and never wanted a baby, while the mother was never heard from during these illusionary flashbacks. It's even suggested by the building superintendent that Walter's parents were either in some sort of danger or in financial trouble that caused the couple to flee room 302 and abandon their newborn baby. When Dahlia Gillespie forced Walter to learn the cult scriptures, she convinced the child that his mother was asleep and would only awaken if he could read the 21 sacraments for the descent of the Holy Mother, but instead of believing his mother would appear in room 302, he believed his mother was the room. When Henry discovers the hidden room in his apartment, he finds the actual body of Walter Sullivan crucified, and though it's never confirmed, after taking his own life in prison, Walter's body may have been recovered by his ghost and hidden in room 302. In the final confrontation, Walter's ghost appears next to a non-hostile being called the Conjurer. Its appearance is that of a giant, humanoid corpse with rotten skin that's suspended from the ceiling by hooks and chains, and has fleshy tubings around itself that looks like umbilical cords, only the creature's top half is seen, as the rest of it hides below the surrounding ring-shaped arena. As long as the Conjurer remains unharmed, Walter's ghost, who's taken the form of a shadowy figure, is invulnerable. He fights with his metal pipe and gun again, but will pose more of a threat, as his movements will include phasing through Henry for surprise attacks from behind. And in addition to his established attacks, Walter will now do a spinning attack that will knock Henry down to the ground. When Henry places Walter's original umbilical cord on the creature, it cries out, as it represents Walter's soul. This unlocks the spears that surround the arena that Henry uses to pierce the creature with. With it now weakened, the shadow disappears from Walter's ghost, effectively making him mortal. When Henry defeats Walter, he calls out to his mother in his dying breath, before all Walter forms vanish. The front door of room 302 then opens to allow Henry to escape, and Eileen to reappear in her hospital bed. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video and I hope you enjoyed it. As I've already mentioned before, I will be doing some Silent Hill 1 videos next, focusing on exploring and showcasing the game environments. And of course I will be doing plenty more enemies analysis, as well as Easter eggs and references videos. So if you're new to the channel and are interested in any of these, then subscribe. That way you can stay up to date on all future videos I put up. And once again, thanks to all of you who have subscribed and are helping to make this channel grow. So until the next video, bye everyone.